those on the recording who don't know, this is the Event Managers to Project Managers series, and it has been a space for bridging the gap, I think, between event management and project management, and showing how transferable those skills are. And really kind of supporting those who might be interested in moving into the world of project management to see how transferable those skills are and find ways to connect with others and connect ideas in order to do that. Now, whilst this is our very final weekly coffee chat, we do have some other great opportunities coming up. We will continue to hold this space for this community, just in different ways. And some of those ways that are coming up quite soon, I wanted to very quickly share with you. So we do have the My Project Mentor platform. This is a free platform I founded with a good friend of mine, Lexi Smith. It's completely free. It's about connecting project management professionals who are already in the profession, who have a bit of experience behind them, but only need to be a few steps ahead of somebody else, and connecting them with potential mentees who are either early on in their career or already a project professional but want to develop themselves further. So that platform is open to mentors at the moment. We will be opening to mentees in the next few days. So a launch in December is happening. So very, very excited about that. We have an APM qualification study group coming up. So if you're interested in trying to reduce the price of the courses, you can actually take the exam, pay for the exam separately. And what we're doing is pulling together a group of people who are interested in learning the actual curriculum, and hopefully reducing that cost as much as we can, depending on the numbers of people we get in. So again, if this is something that you're interested in, getting the APM PMQ qualification, but you don't want high prices of the courses, do get in touch with us. We're hopefully getting a study group together for that. If you already have your PM qualification, but you're looking at Agile and Scrum certification, we have another opportunity to come together. It's an online course, so it's a self-study course, but all you have to pay for is the actual certification, which I think is like £130. So the course is all there. It's actually run by one of the project managers who came on a very earlier coffee chat with us. He has it all online, and he's opening that up to us. You can learn, self-learn, and then do the certification, do the exam yourself. And based on that, he has 100% rate of people doing the self-learning and qualifying the certification. So if that's of interest, I'm going to be sending out information about that as well soon. And the final thing is we're going to have a little Christmas shindig. So do save the date. It's going to be on Tuesday 8th at 7 p.m. It will be an hour. We're inviting project managers and event managers alike, and sort of bridging that gap. It will just be very, very casual in the way that we do these. We'll have a few speakers, and we'll have a bit of networking and a few drinks. So do save the date. I'll be sending out details about that. But today, I am very, very excited to have our guest here, Ben Willmott, joining us with 16 years of experience in digital agencies. Ben really does have real world experience of some of the toughest projects to plan and run at pace. And he's sharing some exclusive insights today about what he looks for in terms of recruits. And this is especially relevant for those who might not have the years of experience that others might have. So Ben, we always start these in the same way. I'm not sure I warned you about this, but I have a few quick fire questions for you just to kick us off. Are you ready?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay, Ben, tell us, what was your favorite age?
My favorite age? I probably have to say 17 is the one that comes off the top of my head. Just all the thrill and excitement of doing things like going out when you're not supposed to go out and going to the pubs, and it all changed once I turned 18 and it was all legal then, it was all okay. So
I can absolutely relate to that. What would we find on your nightstand, Ben?
My nightstand. So I'm not sure if I should admit this really, but
yes.
I've got the what are they called, the eye masks to cover up, which I use sometimes because I just found it's an amazing way to block out light, and I get so much more sleep and maybe another day I'll tell you about my very early morning routine. So it's very important that I get a very good night's sleep.
Brilliant. And the final one, give us a snapshot of an everyday small joy for you.
Small joy. Well, the small joys for me is I've got 2 young kids, so them walking out their rooms in the morning or calling out that they're awake to come and get them, and also being at home for the last 6-7 months, being able to take them, walk them into school and pick them up and things like that. So it's probably some, yeah, they're the most important ones, I should say. There's probably plenty more as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. You're definitely human and definitely one of us. Ben, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to hand over to you, and then we'll have an opportunity for any questions and after that's any kind of key reflections that people are taking away. So Ben, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, as you mentioned that 16 years, that's why I just stroked my beard, because I was just thinking about the grey hairs that I've got in there, and all of the challenges that I've faced over those years being in project management, because it's a really exciting industry and role to be in, because it is ever changing and nothing is ever the same. And I've learnt the most from the mistakes that I've made over the years. And I'm at a point in my career now where I do a lot of things like this. I love working with others and helping others and coaching others, because quite often I don't want other people to make the same mistakes that I did. And when you look back, it all seems quite so obvious. Why did I shouldn't have done that. But at the time, when you're in a very busy project or in a busy environment, it gets a lot harder to spot those things. And just this week, in fact, just yesterday, it was using somewhere I failed before, where I used to just plow on with projects over and over. If things weren't going well, I just work harder and harder and harder, and that's not always the best thing to do. And we had a conversation on the project this week where actually we just need to stop. Just everyone stop. Having a pause for a day or two to take a step back and rethink makes a huge difference. And I wish I knew that when I was younger, actually, rather than just working late into the night. And it makes a big difference. But shall I start with your first point around some of the challenges you mentioned?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome. I guess the first point is around coming from a perspective of like a hiring manager, if you like, is how can I trust this person to do this role if they haven't got like the traditional experience, if you like, on their CV? And you start to think, well, should I go with the safer option? And that's quite a narrow-minded way of looking at it, because a project manager is so much more than just what you've got on your CV and what certifications you've got. And I'll go into that in more detail shortly. And I was also when I was thinking about this question, it made me think about my team at the moment and what skills and experience they actually had coming into the company when they joined. And I couldn't pick one of them who had exactly the right experience for the role, and they could do everything that we needed to do. None of them did. They had their own strengths and had their own weaknesses throughout. But what was really great about everyone that I've hired is it was their mindset and their general approach to how they tackle problems, how they deal with difficult situations, how they deal with team building, conversations with clients, or just things that generally take just a more of a common sense approach, rather than telling me I've done exactly what you need me to do and I've done it 100 times. Because you never find that person. It's very, very rare. You want to find someone who's going to offer a lot more. So again, I'll touch on this in a little while, where I go into what I look for in a bit more detail, because you've also got a challenge of potential hiring managers who just look at certifications as well, which I've done lots of certifications, I've done lots of training, and it has been valuable, but it's not the only thing. So I wouldn't get hung up on that. It's definitely worth looking at training and doing the certifications like some of what Jay just mentioned, but it's not everything. And certainly when you're communicating your experience and what you know, it's something you can talk about, but it shouldn't be your only focus. And then another challenge is, what do you actually put in your CV if you haven't done project management roles for the last few years? But what I often see and the problems I often see with CVs is they all look the same. It doesn't really matter if you've got project management experience or you were an event manager before that. I've had to look through hundreds in the past, and they're very, very hard to tell who's different from the next one. And the way when I talk to people about, if they ask me for advice on how they should create their own CVs, I said, you should actually treat it like it's your own business. Like if you're going to create a new landing page for a product that you have, you wouldn't just copy everyone else's and hope it works. You're going to look for things that make you stand out from everything else that's out there, which is always easier said than done. So you've got to really think about, what is the copy on my landing page, which you're going to do if you're starting a new business. You're going to look at every single little word on there. And you often see at the top of CVs, the first thing you look at is that person's address and their email. And even in some cases, I've seen it say CV or curriculum vitae. I'm like, it's like me going to the Nike website and it tells me this is a trainer website. I'm like, I know it is. I'm there. You don't need to tell me that. And you're wasting valuable time and effort on getting across, who you are. So it's really important that you think about how you create your CV and what that message is, and don't get sucked into just doing what else you see out there. Because if you Google CVs, they all have the same templates pretty much, all very, very similar. But you need to put yourself in that hiring manager's position to go, okay, they picked this up and it might be their 30th CV. What's the first thing I want them to know about me to grab their attention? Because I'm sure I've missed out on great people in the past because their CV's just been really dull and the same as the next one. And it just hasn't caught my eye and I've had to move on to the next one. So I think for event managers who have that challenge of not having all of that background, it's really important to get across much more about who you are and what you stand for and what you're going to bring to that company versus this is what I did for the last 5 years, which might not work. So there's that structure. There's also keyword use as well, because again, if you're reading a CV, you've already got in your head all of these keywords that you're used to every single day. I don't know, it might be iOS app, it might be website, just simple things like that, but there's probably plenty of others you're going to find on that company's website. But you should start dropping in those keywords into your CV, because without them even realizing, they're going to start thinking, well, actually, they know what we do and how we work. Even potentially if you don't, just because you've dropped in some keywords that they're used to. So I think another challenge that can have if you don't have that project management experience is having a clear path or approach to how you actually plan and you prioritize and you manage issues, just the fundamentals of project management. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in some of the other areas as well, but it's a really important thing to think about of, okay, if I'm going to be asked this question, or how am I going to get across what my approach is to planning, even if I've never actually planned a project for a website build before. Fundamentally, project management is the same for anything you do, really. You have to work out the tasks that you need to do, when it's going to start, when it's going to end, but having clear approaches on how you do that is where you can really stand out in your CV or your letter that you're sending to that potential employee, to give them the confidence that you can just pick this up and run with it. So there's some of the challenges that I wanted to talk about. I don't mind what you want to do, Joe, whether we're going through any questions on that, or I can start talking about going into detail about what I look for.
Yeah.
At the end as well.
I think that's a great, I think if you lead into that, and then we'll go into questions. I think it's such a great point, Ben. I just put there about kind of almost treating your career like an entrepreneur, right? You are your business and your skills are your products. It's such a great point and a reframe, in terms of how you're thinking about it. So yeah, head into any tips that you have.
So, so what I look for when I'm looking to employ a new project manager. So the first thing is, can I see myself working with this person? So making that connection is just really, really critical, because it isn't actually just me. It's the team of project managers that I have. It's all the other individuals that they're going to work with. So I need to be able to make that connection. Are they coming across as sincere? You know, do they talk about others rather than just me? This is what I did this, I did that, which you can fall into that trap sometimes when you're in an interview, because you really want to get across like the perfect you, but sometimes that can come across as that's all you think about is yourself. And as a project manager, it's so much more than that. You've got to continually be thinking about other people that you're working with and how they're feeling, and where they need help. So if you've done any studying or know about the Scrum Master role, one of the key things about that role is the servant leader approach. And that's the approach that everyone should take. You don't need to be a Scrum Master for it. You know, everyone should be there to help the next person, because the more we help each other, it actually it benefits the group and yourself individually without even realizing it sometimes. So I'm also looking for sort of like the one thing that individual can bring. So this is really important. If you can find something you can really hone in on, that's a particular skill that you have, and it doesn't have to be directly linked to project management. It could be that you're used to regularly communicating with really senior stakeholders, or you know, you've got up and you've spoken in front of 50 people before. It can be anything, but I'm always looking for that one thing that might be a little bit different in them that our team currently don't have as a capability or as a skill set, because it's really important for me that I don't have a team of clones who all do the same thing, because everyone is very different. And we tell everyone in the team that whatever you're good at, that's what we're going to focus on. I'm not going to try and turn you into this one because this other person is good at it. We find what they're good at and then we focus on there. So we've got a very, very different team of PMs with different skill sets, because if you try and force everyone down the same sort of funnel and journey, then people are just going to fall off because they'll lose interest and they're not developing as they should do. So, but that also links into things like what is their general approach to doing their job. You know, how do they organize themselves, for example, at the start of the day. There's little things like that where you can, if they can start to build up my knowledge on who they are and how they work, less about what project or event they did in the past, whatever it might be, I can then start to picture how I can work with them and how they can start to fit in the team. So lots of real world examples is really important for just general day-to-day things that you would do in the role. And then I also I work out what their mindset is. So, you know, what is their approach to team building? What is their approach to managing issues and challenges that they have? Because again, that links back into, you know, who they are as a person. You know, how are they going to deal with different things that come up? Because there's always going to be things that are going to come up that we don't predict on projects. So I want to know how they're going to react to it. Are they going to go into their shell? Are they going to stand up and say, I'm going to help and I'm going to take control of this situation and I'm going to deal with it? And the opposite that I've seen of that, which hasn't worked in interviews, is when the person who looks like they've got loads of experience and lots of different projects, but all they're telling me is how many certifications they've got, what they've studied, and then they'll tell me about a project that this is a £3 million project, it had 100 people involved and it was huge, but that tells me nothing about them, about what they did. Because, you know, anyone who's been involved in any sort of projects or organising huge events, you could talk about the grand scale of this big event or big projects, but it's like, what did you do on it? That's what I'm trying to find out, and this is really important. So, so I think the recommendation on that is just to be wary about not talking too big about what happened around you, but focus in on what you actually did. So the other area which I've touched on before is your approach or to day-to-day scenarios. And if you've got any things that you've experienced where certain scenarios that didn't go so well in your career, then it's worth talking about, because I often ask what's gone wrong for you. You know, tell me something that's really awkward situation you're in where it went horribly wrong, and I've had really mixed feedback on that. Some people have really opened up and said, well, this happened and it was an absolute disaster. I didn't do this, I didn't do that. And that's actually what I'm looking for that honesty and openness, but for them to then talk about what they actually learned from it. I've had the opposite, where some people just can't answer that because it's an interview. They just don't want to come across as being weak and have weaknesses. But we all make mistakes. We all have our own weaknesses. No one's perfect. So it's always a much better interview when I can actually find out what went wrong on something, because I could rattle off 50 things probably if we had the time to do it. So in the last week, I've got a few I can hold my hand up for, things I shouldn't have done. So, and yeah, linked into that, how you learn as well. Because I never expect anyone to be learning about project management all the time, or whatever role you're in. Like I heard, it was a while back now, but I heard someone, I think it was on Twitter, who said, why do engineers in interviews, and I've seen this, they always get asked, what apps are you building? What coding do you do outside of work? As if you don't do that, then you're not a good engineer, because you obviously don't love it that much. But then no one asks a doctor, who are you treating after work, do they? Because it's like, they're not going to do that. They're helping people all day. It's the same for project managers. You don't need to be always turned on and go, I'm learning this now, I'm learning that now, and I'm going to this event, I'm doing that event. It's more about what you learn on the actual job is the most important thing. So I just want to understand the learning approach in that individual, how they've dealt with those mistakes that they've made and turned it into a positive is the big thing. And I noted down this quote, pain plus reflections equals progress, which I absolutely love, because I do a lot of self-reflection, and most of the self-reflection which I turn into improvements is from the mistakes that I've made. Why reflect too long on something that was amazing? You should celebrate that. You don't really need to reflect on it because you've done it really well, but actually what went wrong? Like Nadine, you were saying earlier about the big online event coming up for the first time, and I bet when you come out of there are probably 50 things you're like, oh, we should have done this, we should have done that. There always is, isn't there? There's always things that you've missed, but it's how you then actually turn that back into a positive for the next one. So that's what I look for, as well as, yeah, how do you learn as you go? Because I'm expecting you to make mistakes, but making mistakes is actually a good thing because you learn from it. Okay, anything else on what I look for? I think that probably covers the bulk of it. I'm sure there's something major that I might have missed, but I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just kind of noted some key things for me that came out around, what did you do specifically? I think we all are guilty of like talking quite broadly about like, I did this event and I did that event, like it's quite obvious. And I think especially for event professionals who are moving into project management, we know now after, we've been doing this for 6 months, events is a project, right? It's a type of project. You've been doing project management in a loose way, and project management training will provide that kind of methodology that provides that kind of consistency in terms of the way you work. But you were still sort of, you were still solving a problem in some way. So what was that problem that you either were brought in to do, or what problems did you identify that you then fixed, and then focusing really, really specifically on what you did there? So I think that was a really great key one for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And on the question around how you can demonstrate your experience, I had some notes on that, and it literally, how do you turn your experience into projects? Because I think I said this earlier, everything is a project we do in life. If you've got actions, you need to do something by a certain time, it's a project. So you need to make sure that, when you're describing your experience, you're just simply changing a few things, like putting the word projects in there regularly.
Yeah.
Something really simple like that, because it is a project. And that can make a really big difference. It's going back to the keyword thing in the CVs. Rather than saying the event, say the project that I worked on where we delivered this event, blah, 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 whatever it is you're going to talk about. So just look for the little things like that, other little keywords. And
Ben,
Yeah.
Whilst you're talking about keywords, from an agency point of view, what sort of keywords would you want to see like immediately scanning? Is it like agile, project, communication? Is there anything?
Yeah, God, there's loads really, and I guess it will differ a little bit depending on which company you talk to. But yeah, certainly agile projects just mentioned. If you know, if you can find out the type of methodology that they're using, or if you're pretty confident they're probably using something like Scrum, you can start to drop those ones in there as well.
Mm.
Look at the products and services that they're actually creating, so you can work out roughly what sort of projects you would be working on, because then you can take keywords from that, like I said, iOS development earlier, or Android developments, website at the really highest level. So it's worth just looking at the types of projects they're doing to work out what type of keywords you could use, because you can just Google, that project and find a bit of information, or even if it's in their case study on the website, just taking out some keywords from there, because hopefully the person who's doing the interview has had some involvement in that. As I said earlier, without even thinking, they'll start to think, oh, they know what they're talking about. They've done this before.
Yeah, and even as an example, like for example, when I was whilst I was event professional, we had a CRM. I didn't work on the CRM, but I was familiar from a user point of view. And then when I was applying for jobs as a project manager, like I didn't work on the CRM, but I had experience of working with that type of CRM as a user. So I still put it in there, and I used the word CRM. I used the actual the company name, and I didn't lie in there. I didn't say that I project managed this project, but I did say I was familiar with using this from a user point of view, and some of the problems we had with it, and I talked a bit about that in my interview. So that's a way you can spin it. You don't necessarily have to have experience, like as in directly project managing that thing, but you might be a user of that thing.
Yeah. So I've got, my next point actually was around research, which so this isn't anything new. It should be fairly obvious, but about how key it is to do your research on that company you're working with. But it's not just on the company that you're interviewing for, but also the industry and the services as well that company provides. So it's just following on from that last point. The more you can learn about all of those different areas, the more you can just drop into your conversations, whether that's in the interview or the CVs or covering letters or whatever it might be. And because if you don't do that, it's going to be passed over. You're going to be missed because you haven't been able to make that connection. And if I've seen a CV and I've interviewed someone who might not have all of that experience, if I've made that connection with them, so all those things I said I look for when I'm interviewing, plus they've got all those keywords that they've been bringing into the conversation, and they have some approaches for how they deal with sort of typical scenarios that aren't related to a particular project, whether that's, I don't know, dealing with a difficult stakeholder being a classic one. This is my normal approach for it. And suddenly I've got confidence in them that actually I could work with this person. They know what they're talking about because they've dropped in all these familiar words for me without potentially me even realizing. And they've got some really common sense approaches to how they deal with the most common scenarios, because no one's going to know how you do it, how you run your projects. Every company is different, have their different ways of working. There is all those frameworks out there like Scrum and Kanban or traditional waterfall and things like that, but everyone does it slightly differently. It's very, very different out of the book, which is a really important thing to remember. So research is really key. Another area was around how you prioritize as well. So project managers should be really organized. And if you're not, then you're going to struggle because you're dealing with so many different things all the time. So it's really important that you get across how you approach just managing yourself and those around you. Starting with yourself, I think, is the most important one, because if you don't have a set approach to when you sit down, so this is how I plan my day, this is how I plan my week, then there's going to be doubts already, about could you do the job, and that actually gets missed a lot in the people that I interview, where I often ask them, how do you do it? And it's always a bit like, they have to sort of think about it. Where really, off the bat, you need to be able to say, yeah, this is exactly how I plan my day to make sure I'm working on the most valuable things in that moment. And we, in my company and team, on a project we're working on at the moment, some of the team leads, we have stand-ups first thing in the morning. What we do now, because the project is a very, very busy one, we just talk about what's the number one priority for us today as a team or individually to get done, because otherwise you get caught up in all the small little things, and it's really easy to be busy as a project manager, or in any job really. There's always something you can pick up and do, but it's more important that you focus on the value. So that's something that's worth talking about.
We've got a question here, Ben, actually. It says, so Tim, I found that there is a catch-22 around creative agency project work. I've not ever obtained an agency gig without previous agency work, and the agency won't hire without creative side experience. How would you suggest we break this lovely cycle?
Yeah, it's a good question. I know, because I've hired people who haven't come from agencies. And it just goes back to what I spoke about before, because you need to be able to understand what the agency world is like, that not every project is the same. You've got different clients that you're potentially, working on one project, then 4 months later, you've got a brand new client and they're lacking all sorts of understanding of how you work. So you have to accept from day one that you're always going to be going uphill to educate your clients and bringing new teams together. So it's all about how adaptable you are, which is a good point to make, going back to when I was talking about what I look for in the individuals. So adaptability is key. And it's not that we say to them, you're going to be so busy, it's all over the place, it's really disorganized. But it's not like when it's client side where you're just repeating a lot of things over and over again. So you have to be confident in your approach and how you do things and how you tackle those problems. So I think the main point to answer your question, Tim, is you need to convey your understanding of how agencies work. And there's no getting away from that. I understand how agencies, how fluid you need to be, things come in, things changes, different clients. Talk about that, because if you understand that, then they're going to have more confidence in you to say, oh, well, he hasn't worked in agencies, but he understands the typical agency work, and happy to have an extended conversation on if it helps. Because it's a bit naive to think just because you haven't worked in an agency, you can't do it. It is different. But so as long as you've got that understanding of the agency ways of working, if you like, then that should be enough.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben.
So, sorry, were you about to ask another question?
No, you go.
So I wanted to also talk about your approach to how you deliver the interview as well. Again, I've touched on this a little bit. So this is around making sure you're aware of where your weaknesses are. And it's about effectively getting comfortable with your uncomfortable, which is not easy to do in an interview, as I said earlier, because you want to portray yourself as being, the perfect role. You must employ me. I can do everything perfectly to a certain extent. And that just means you've got to get the preparation right for any interview, because interviews are often built up into this real pressure cooker situation. And what I tend to do is I try to release that tension in an interview, because I want to see what that person is really like. And, I don't want to come in if they're wearing a shirt and tie or something like that. I'm like, you don't need to wear that, loosen your tie, relax, try and have a conversation with them. But not everyone has that approach in their interviews. But the way that you can reduce that pressure on you is it's all about preparation and practice. And that can be practice with a partner, it can be practice in a mirror, it can be practice with a mobile phone recording yourself. And this is an approach that it actually came from, I heard it from Clive Woodward, the England coach from many, many years ago, who won the World Cup in 2003, about how he approaches generally just getting better all the time in preparation. And he used the analogy about golf, where he's a 6 handicapper, I think. but he's confident he'll beat anyone else at that same level. He won't beat Tiger Woods and things like that, but anyone at the same level. And it's all about his preparation. And he had this approach, which was the 3Ds, and it was discover, define, and do. And it's really simple. And if you're thinking about it for an interview, especially when it's remote as well, so there's more challenges involved. The discover part is you just go really broad with your thinking about all the things that you need to do to prepare for this interview. And I would recommend using mind maps just because I love them, and you can just do them really, really quickly. But you've got to think about all the different areas that you need to do to be able to prepare and effectively deliver this interview, to the best you can possibly do. And that can be all your equipment setup. It can be your lighting, all things like that. There's probably 50 things you can prepare for a remote interview these days. There's all the research element. There's the stories you want to tell about you to get across, what are your strengths that you're bringing to this, or prepare a story on where things didn't go so well from you and what you learned from it. And again, there's loads of other things you can do, but the discover bit is just going really, really broad and high level. And then the define is you then break it down into different areas, because what you don't want to do is have a huge piece of paper with just all this clutter on there, or just ideas and thoughts. You define it in different areas. So like preparation, for example, company research, delivery on the day, things like that. And then the do part is just the practice bit. You just then practice and learn over and over, so you can really stand out. Because what you're trying to do here is how can you do it better than anyone else who's out there? If there's another 20 people who are interviewing for that role, you've got to be in the mindset of, right, how can I be better than that next person? Which is a bit tricky because obviously you're never meeting these people. You don't really know what they're doing. But again, based on my experience in interviewing candidates, I know that majority, if not all of them, are going to this sort of level to really think big and wide. And it can really help you as well, because if you've got problems, if you're doing this remotely, you've got to think about what could go wrong. Is no one else using the internet in your house? Have you got the phone turned off in the room? You don't want that going off. Just loads and loads of little things. Just try and think about everything that could possibly go wrong, and then everything you could possibly do to make it as sort of the best interview you could possibly have. So that 3D approach, super simple. And it does link into other things that I've mentioned in interviews as well. Having those small approaches that you can really clearly articulate to solve certain problems just gets your message across really quickly without having to go into any detail, and it gives the person who's interviewing you, more confidence that they know what they're doing. They've got an approach for this. Really simple. So I always recommend having a process of as many things as possible.
Yeah, using that DDD in your back pocket. That's I really like that model. So do we have any questions at this stage? Any questions? Feel free, if you don't want to put take yourself off mute, you can put those in the chat. If not, we will have a quick round robin to finish up. We are getting to that Q2 point of a key takeaway, something either you were reminded of, you knew, or something that you are taking away from this conversation. Tim Jolly, that's a good question from Tim. Do you offer work experience?
All right. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do at Karmarama. Yeah, we all have a thing called Karma Cadets, which is, I think we've got 4 cadets at the moment, and that's people from all sorts of different backgrounds come in, and they do an incredible process of learning about them and what they do and what they want to get out of life and things like that, and then they get put into different parts of the business. But yeah, we do work experience within Karmarama, because get in contact too. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Okay.